Right-wingers will never stop moaning, and this time it's Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is what she said in response to Andy Burnham announcing that the government will clamp down on fake discounts, hidden charges, and subscription traps. Burnham brings forward ban on subscription traps to ease cost of living. This is embarrassing now. A brand new Prime Minister who says he's got a plan to deliver change, growth, and tackle the cost of living, and all he's offered so far is petty tinkering. Total cringe. I mean, I don't think Hartley-Brewer actually really cares about tackling the cost of living, so ironic to say that. So what specifically is Andy Burnham calling for? Subscriptions will be easier to cancel and companies will be compelled to make it clear when contracts auto-renew at a higher price, Andy Burnham has announced. The Prime Minister is also planning to outlaw shops from falsely claiming products previously retailed at much higher prices to advertise supposed deals, which he said tricks shoppers into thinking they are getting better value on purchases. Now, despite those moaning at Burnham, the policy to make it easier to cancel a subscription was actually drafted under Starmer. A crackdown on subscription traps could save the average person nearly £170 a year, according to the Department for Business and Trade. Consumers will no longer have to make endless phone calls to cancel a subscription, and they will be given a 14-day calling off period after the end of a trial period or when an annual subscription automatically renews. The charges are expected to come into force in spring 2027. The laws will enable people to cancel subscriptions with the click of a button, the DBT said. Companies will be forced to give clear information upfront to prevent consumers from being silently rolled onto expensive contracts. Burnham is set to bring in these changes 3 months earlier than planned. But it's not just Julie Hartley-Brewer, but you can count on Zia Youssef moaning about it and changing the conversation straight back to immigrants and refugees. You know what's more annoying than hard to cancel subscriptions, Andy? A Prime Minister allowing the invasion of our country to continue day after day. A Prime Minister allowing the killers of a young police officer to walk freely. A Prime Minister who was out of his depth. I think you know how far this country has fallen when a prominent politician of colour is describing immigration as an invasion. Now, look, the reason why I wanted to talk about these policies is that small but substantive policies, I think, are very good. I mean, millions of people are sick of hidden charges and trapping people in subscriptions. I mean, I get furious when I just want to speak to someone on the phone and you're fobbed off and you find yourself, going round in circles. I mean, so many companies don't let you speak to someone. It's all just endless AI chats and FAQs. I think making it easier to cancel subscriptions is a really good policy. Now, a political project requires radical long-term change and everyday changes. And I don't think Burnham will do the radical change, but small policies such as this, I think, are good. Kevin, do you think that Hartley-Brewer is right? That, it's tinkering around the edges and Burnham is distracting people with small and less important policies?
She's right in one respect. It is sort of tinkering. This particular policy. I don't think he's doing it to distract, though. I think this is actually sort of his game plan of making a kind of dent in the problem by 1,000 small cuts, rather than just, when I say cut, I don't mean cut to spending. I mean like the idea of a kind of drip, drip, drip effect. That he doesn't necessarily have the political capital to be able to make massive changes now. He would have to probably go to the electorate and get a general election kind of mandate to be able to really do that. But he can certainly make some tinkering at the edges changes and improve the situation to the point where the Labour Party could go into the next election with a sensible chance of being able to form some kind of government, maybe a coalition or something like that. But to say that he's distracting rather than actually just governing for the sake of governing, or governing in a way that people want him to, that his voters want him to, is ridiculous. Also, Julia, you should be really careful about what you wish for here. When you say he's tinkering at the edges, do you think he should go further with his economic progressive policies? What do you think he should do here? Enact full socialism? Maybe? Or are you just sort of moaning for the sake of moaning, which is basically what she does for a living, stealing a living? Anyway, as to Zia Yusuf, it's Pick Me Yusuf is a really interesting one. Why do we keep hearing this man's opinion as if it's relevant to anything? When literally he could get out of bed and stub his toe and he would blame it on migrants somehow. I don't care what he has to say. He's not even an elected official. At least with Richard Tice well, actually, I was about to say Farage, but he's not an MP at the moment. But he probably will be very soon again. Unless Binface pulls off the most stunning by-election victory in history, which would be funny. At least they're MPs, and so their opinion sort of matters. Zia Yusuf is nobody. He's such a nobody that they wouldn't even let him stand in a by-election. Like, he's just irrelevant to it. But it just goes to show you, there is no placating of right-wing anti-immigrant bullshit. Unless the government's policy is to literally mince migrants and feed their mush to dogs, they will never ever be happy. They want to enact violence upon people. They hate brown people and they want you to enact violence upon them. So why do these centrist twats keep trying to placate them? Why do Keir Starmer and Burnham and Shabana Mahmood and previous Home Secretaries, why do they constantly keep trying to placate them? You can't. Unless you totally 100% agree with them, they'll never accept you. The racists will never accept you. So stop trying. Have a sensible immigration policy where you don't just go down to the White Cliffs of Dover and dick swing about it. Actually put together safe routes for people. That's how you stop the boats, by allowing them safe routes to get here. It's ridiculous to me. But in terms of Andy Burnham's policies, I think they'll have a positive impact. I think you'll see a at least medium-term continuation of the Burnham bounce. I don't think they're ever going to get to 30% unless he goes much more radical, which I don't think he will. But I think you'll see a kind of tapering off of the rise, but a steady holding of that position of them being in first place for quite some time, unless he does the radical thing, because eventually people will get sick of that as well. Because we have to wait and see what his legislative agenda is going to be when they return in September. But so far, the mood music on that isn't fantastic, and ultimately the same passive bullshit governance will lead to the same indifference or hatred from the British people. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. But ultimately, this is just right-wing whinging, as always.
I think the thing with Yusuf, though, it's like boring, because like he's saying, why aren't you stopping the boats and stopping the invasion? The fact that people even say invasion is absolutely fucking insane, right? You don't know what an invasion is, clearly, right? No. High levels of immigration is not an invasion.
It's ironic because their policy to stop the invasion is to actually invade France.
Right,
to put
exactly.
British naval personnel into French waters and French land to put migrants back, and thinking that the French people will just be totally fine with that.
Exactly. But the point is, it's like, you do realise that political parties and governments have to speak about all things, because you notice how anything that's announced, people from Reform say, yeah, but what about immigration? Or, I've noticed he hasn't said anything about the boats. I was like, yeah, you do realise, though, that you have to talk about everything. Immigration, climate change, domestic policy. But Reform have nothing to say on anything else, which is why they keep going back to that, because that's their comfort zone.
That's the only thing they want to talk about. Because that's the only thing they care about, because they're idiots. I'm sorry, if you're a Reform voter, you're an idiot. You might not be a racist, although many of them are, but you are at least an idiot. Be it a useful one or an active one, it doesn't really matter to me. You have been suckered into thinking that the small boats are the problem rather than the billionaires who are fucking you. That's the sort of problem, that's the dynamic we have here. But yeah, like, I don't know what more he could do. He kept the Panopticon Pam as the Home Secretary. What more do they fucking want from him? Literally, unless you can agree to kill migrants, to put up like spikes on the White Cliffs of Dover to impale the small boats, they're never going to be okay with you. So stop trying. They're not going to vote for you. They didn't vote for fucking prickface. Sir Prickface, they're not going to vote for you either, Northern Prickface. So just disregard them. They're not your voters. They are your citizens. You do have to rule in their behalf, but they're not your voters. Stop trying to win them over.
I also think these sorts of policies, I don't think they're necessarily tinker around the edges. I don't think they're transformative, of course, but I think that these sorts of policies directly address the cost of living in some kind of way. Because what you would hear from like a neoliberal, and I'm not saying that Andy Burnham is completely rejecting neoliberalism, but Starmer, like full-blown neoliberal, would look at policies that try not to like intervene, I don't think. Whereas like saying that companies have to change the rules on like, trapping your subscriptions, I think that's quite substantial. Like I can imagine that will be a policy on like a Mamdani manifesto. Like that, those sort of policies, I'm like, I could absolutely hear Mamdani doing that.
Yeah, it's essentially just social democratic boilerplate stuff.
Yeah.
That wasn't seen as particularly radical even 20 years ago. You got to bear in mind, like, Tony Blair was quite a right-wing prime minister, and yet they actually did some relatively transformative things in terms of Sure Start, in terms of tax credits and pensioner tax credits and things like that, that did really positively impact the lives of the most poor in our society. And the Labour Party has even given up on even that kind of thing. And so now we have what I think will be impactful but not transformative, I think is the way to describe these policies. They will make people's lives better, so that's good, and will win support on that basis, because people have become like, this is a horrible example, but they're like abused animals. They're not looking for the best thing in the world, they're just looking not to hurt anymore. They just want someone to not continue to beat them. And so we just want a government that kind of governs on our behalf and aren't totally corrupt, evil pieces of shit. Is that too much to ask? And so the fact that he's giving them that, not transformative, not brilliant, not really rousing and inspiring, but just all right. Well, that's enough. That's enough. That could lead to a landslide at some point if he continues to do that for the rest of his term.
Well, that's what I mean, right? Again, like, as a socialist, I'm sort of coming at this from the left, but I think that what Burnham is really good at is these sorts of things. I thought his first week was a very successful premiership. Okay, talking about bringing back down the cap, for example, cutting energy bills, whatever. Again, not massive. Yeah, I mean that's a throwback to Jeremy bloody Corbyn, right? And again. We don't do these two again. But what I mean is, like, these are really important policies. In fact, I don't think you could even build a successful political project, even a socialist one, without doing these kinds of things. Because I think sometimes, say we're going to have a break from neoliberalism. What the fuck does that mean to your average person? I actually think sometimes leftists and our big political ideas is so alienating. I'm not saying we don't do them, but sometimes we're saying we need to do this, this, even stuff like nationalisation, which people support. These are big policies, but actually, I do think everyday domestic policies, which are easily communicated, is really important. And that's something Keir Starmer did not do. In fact, when it came to some policies, which people could say they weren't bad policies, they were never easy to grasp and they weren't communicated very well. So I actually think, in order for a political project to be really successful, I want to hear more stuff like this every single day, just slowly dripping it out, because people can be like, oh, immediately I'm hearing something that's happening right now. Not as in like, I'm going to, fix the housing crisis. I'm going to, redistribute wealth. All amazing things. But like, people would be, one, skeptical of you doing it. And two, it's going to be years maybe before that. I think people would really respond to, oh my God, like next week, I actually might save £100 because he's just done that easy policy. Why haven't he done that before? I think that's actually really tangible and really successful for people.
Well, exactly. Technocratic rule is sort of by its nature Byzantine. You can't really understand it. It's not meant to be understood. It's done by lawyers in legalese. Now, it can be effective in terms of steering the state of the ship of state and all the rest of it, but people don't get it. People don't get it at all because it's not meant to be gotten. Whereas, like you say, the successful campaigning strategy of people like Mamdani is to say, don't talk about reappropriation of transportation funds. Talk about I'm going to fix potholes.
Yeah.
Because people see that, they understand it, they know what you're going to try and do. Now, in the courthouse or in the Senate, in the Congress, in the Parliament, whatever, you have to then talk about reappropriation and all of that shite, right? But to the people, put out a TikTok saying, I am going to make your life better and here is how, is perfect. That's why the ridiculousness of these old media twats going on about, oh, he's just doing TikToks. But that's how people get their fucking news.
It means communication.
He's cutting out you. That's why they're annoyed. He's cutting them out as the middleman.
Yeah.
There is no middleman between his message and the people seeing the message anymore. That's what really scares them. That's what's always scared them about the internet, and while they've tried to clamp down on it in every way, ban TikTok, ban this, ban that, put age restrictions, everything, because they realise that unfiltered, people like me and you can just come out and say, fuck capitalism. And that is scary for them, because they're not scared of the poor. They're scared of people who start fucking thinking. So anyone who can make them think is an enemy to them.
I think when you mentioned about potholes as well, I think this is really important. That sometimes, because when you hear, the only time you ever hear about potholes is during a local election, right? And bins and stuff. I actually think something which would be really successful is if governments, like national governments, started doing local policy, communicating that. Imagine if Andy Burnham next week said, I'm going to announce the end of potholes and I'm going to do a national campaign and we're going to fix potholes across the entire country. That man's going to get fucking 650 seats, right? And you might think, oh, potholes aren't a big deal, which they are for people, but it's like a local issue, but you've transformed it into a national one. Imagine if you talked about bins. I think prime ministers talk about bins would be amazing, you know?
It's an intangible. Politicians want something big and bold that's going to be like flashy that will make a headline. And that's not ultimately what wins elections. It's what do people see on their doorstep? It's bread and butter issues. And the kind of the semblance of decay in the country is summed up by the fact that some of our roads look like third world countries.
Yeah.
Our infrastructure is pathetic, embarrassing for a modern first world nation, supposedly. You can't. There are parts of Birmingham's road network that I don't want to go on because I also don't want the Jesus Christ, the VAT the problems with having to go to get that fixed. The people's bread and butter issues need to be tackled. If, like you say, you're the national government, you could take that power in hand. Now, he did say he wanted to give more power to local governments, so it'd be a bit weird, but maybe if he packaged it up with, here are some more powers, but I'm taking potholes back, and I'm taking the funding for potholes back, you can fuck off, right? And then he sorts potholes out. If he became the pothole fixer, the pothole king, like you say, landslide. He'd go
down in history, and that's something. And like, because I don't buy the argument, which is that he needs to get a mandate. So anything that he breaks on the 2024 manifesto, he needs to put in a new manifesto. Political pundits love that shit, right? But your average person doesn't want another election. Your average person wants fucking solutions. And why they're becoming so frustrated and why they're going towards more of the left or the right is because they feel like actually, like, our politicians aren't even doing technocratic politics, right? Forget populism. They're not even just doing the basic, like, running a government. And I think potholes and bins are part of that.
One thing I'd love him to do, I'm not sure it'll win many votes, which is why, of course, it's never happened, even under Labour governments, is that it was in the manifesto. Get rid of the House of Lords. Keir Starmer won an election saying he was going to scrap the House of Lords. You can do it. Go and do it. It was in the manifesto. The Lords can't fucking reject it. You can use the Parliament Act. It would get through a court. It was in the fucking manifesto of a government that won a landslide. Fucking do it. Instantly, Conservative power is sliced in half.
It's such an easy win as well. Like, you could just do it. But, that's something I actually don't think Burnham would do because I think there's too much political lobbying for him.
He's a fucking
and he is spineless.
He's a playwright. And again, constitutional change sounds nice, but wins basically 0 votes because it's like 20th on the priority list of every person.
No, but I do think
I wanted to get rid of the House of Lords, and it's not in my top 10.
I could see that, but I could see that getting a really good headline, and at least people going, do you know what? We wanted change in the Starmer. It didn't happen. Burnham's come in, and that's happened as well.
Yes, and no.
I think
the thing is, the Conservative press would fucking savage him. This is another nail in the coffin of traditional Britain. That's the reason that people don't want to do it. It kicks up so much fuss for so little political gain that even governments that really want to do it just end up going, oh, it's path of least resistance, let's just stack it with our mates.